midnight with visibility 1 nautical miles or less.
So we just ask you don't lean or touch on anything, but obviously you can take any pictures or videos. So we're here at Oscar Zero. There's 5 sites in each of these squadrons, so 15 sites in total. Each of these sites had 10 missiles that they controlled, so that little area would be a flight of missiles. There was 150 missiles in total. The sites, like this one, were decommissioned in the late 90s. Our specific site was decommissioned July 17th, 1997.
On December 2nd, 1942, in a squash court beneath the west stands of Stagg Field at the University of Chicago, scientists led by Enrico Fermi conducted the first controlled, self-sustaining nuclear chain reaction.
So originally the land was bought for all these different sites in the 1960s. When they first built them, it was purchased from local landowners. If local landowners did not want to give up that good farmland, it was taken anyway by eminent domain. Didn't have much choice. Eventually, they could get their land back. If they did not want it back, it was put up for government auction. And that's how a lot of people actually obtain them for their businesses or for homes, different purposes like that. So some of them are used for like an ammunition business. A couple from Hawaii own this one up at Juliet. A family from Ohio own Hotel Zero.
On the morning of July 16th, 1945, the work of the scientists came to fruition. Named Trinity, the United States unleashed the world's first nuclear explosion. William L. Lawrence witnessed the test.
Just at that instant there rose from the bowels of the earth a light, not of this world, the light of many suns in one. It was a sunrise such as the world has never seen, a great green super sun climbing in a fraction of a second to a height of more than 8,000 feet, rising ever higher until it touched the clouds, lighting up earth and sky all around with a dazzling luminosity.
So this is the rec room. So this actually used to be a garage. Up until the 80s, everything that you'll see in here was like a barracks. It was tile floor, seafoam green walls, not much insulation, pretty just bare. They kind of built everything, in a quick span of 2 years, didn't have time for much accommodations here, but eventually, they added the carpet, the wallpaper, the artwork. There's little ducks above the windows, just fun little things like that to make it a little more homey here. Part of the reason they did that also was a lot of the personnel that worked here were young. They were from urban areas or down south, not used to the boring winters of North Dakota.
Less than 1 month later, the U.S. would be the first to use the newly invented weapon of mass destruction on the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki and bring World War II to a conclusion. With the successful development and use of the atomic bomb, it seemed that the race for atomic weapons was at an end. But in actuality, it was only beginning.
The personnel who worked here, there was 8 topsides, so that consisted of a chef, a facilities manager. The facilities manager was in charge of really everything from paperwork to blowing the snow, that kind of thing. And then you had the security team, so you had your day side and night side. They each served 12 shifts and rotated. And then you had your 2 missileers that served down below for the 24-hour shift. They stayed in the capsule down there and then went back to the base for a few days. And then you topside here served 3 days, and then they went back to the base for a few days. And at the base, they would, have their personal days, debriefing, training, that kind of thing.
There are 2 main land masses, the complex of the 2 Americas and the Eurasian complex. Prior to the advent of strategic missiles, the Air Force already had in effect a 3-pronged or 3-dimensional strategy to operate in this world geography. We had long-range bombers of the B-52 type, intercontinental bombers, capable of flying from one complex to the other and returning. We had intermediate-range bombers of the B-47 type, which can fly from bases located on the fringes of the Eurasian complex to any point on that landmass. We also had fighter aircraft like the F-84 and F-100, capable of flying from Allied bases within Eurasia itself. Their range tremendously extended through air-to-air refueling. When missiles arrived on the scene, they began to augment the striking force of this kind of air power. ICBMs like Atlas and Titan, the intercontinental missiles, add to our long-range potential. An IRBM like Thor adds to our middle-range deterrent program. And a missile like Matador, with a range of several hundred miles, blends with our fighter force. For the immediate future, at least, the idea of combining aircraft and missiles, mixing them, seems like the ideal solution to defense.
So this is the site of the cook and the chef.
They had bunk beds.
They did indeed. Quite cosy.
Yeah, hopefully they got along, especially while they were cooking.
Hope they didn't eat too many sprouts. Could you imagine the smell?
Oh, man. But they're right next to the kitchen here. Like tight quarters, a bit, well, more room than we've got.
She was saying that every room that has an orange number on it used to have, at some point, explosives stored in it.
Wow, okay, so this one was a bunk and it had explosives in it?
So, yeah, it had been used for two different things
Oh, so
over the years. So maybe it was used for explosives and then the bunk, or maybe it was a bunkhouse and then it was used for explosives.
I think they had to sleep with missiles and ammunition under their beds.
Oh, check those guns out.
Oh, wow. There you go. That explains the orange 4 on the door. Next room here, okay. 4 would stay in this one. So they're all starting to same typical type of layout here.
Yeah. And then down here we have the facility manager's office quarters.
Okay.
He needs a new pair of shoes.
I know. I wonder if those old school Nikes are part of the wardrobe there or
I doubt it.
standard issue. But he does have a decent sized room here with the desk for paperwork.
And I guess in some ways, seeing the date of the place, this is quite luxurious, really.
Oh, yeah.
And then just outside here, you've got the facilities closet where they stored all the loo paper and the bedding and stuff like that.
All the essentials.
Time. Early morning of the 1st of February, 1961. At Cape Canaveral, the Air Force is ready for Minuteman's initial full-scale flight test. The 1st of the month is an appropriate date. For the first time in the history of the entire world, a solid propellant intercontinental ballistic missile would be fired. It would be the first ICBM to have its first flight test in a complete configuration. All 3 stages and re-entry vehicle separation would have to work in perfect synchronization the very first crack out of the box. Time of launch, 11 a.m. The Air Force could report outstanding success. All 3 stages functioned as programmed. The re-entry vehicle hit the target as programmed, some 4,600 miles downrange. A truly remarkable achievement, accomplished only 2 years after the Department of Defense gave the Air Force the official go-ahead for Minuteman.
All right, so this was the original front entrance to the building. Security was cleared, everyone was cleared at the gate before being allowed through this point. Through this door that you're all about to go through, there's a little slot in the door. They had to pass their information and IDs through the little slot in the door. And here would be where the security would be. This is where the missileers would be cleared before going down below or any maintenance, things like that. Everything was set by motion detectors throughout the perimeter of the fences and within the missiles themselves at the different silos. Those motion detectors could be tripped by actually anything. From any animal you can think of to just snow piling up, the wind, people throwing cans over the fences, farm equipment, you name it, it would be set off. And usually that's what the security issues were. Sometimes things got a little more serious than that. I know some of the sites, not any really in North Dakota, had to do with protesters. But one of the big things too was actually farmers parking on the access roads to the different missiles. Each of the missiles had their own little gravel road that went to them. So sometimes farmers wanted to use those for their equipment and would go out to their fields using those. So they had to be a little cooperative with that. But sometimes people were just curious of the different silos or, you know, the different sites like this. So they would just stop by and check it out, which that wasn't a really good idea either because you were met with the security team and you were also met with a helicopter maybe overhead. It wasn't usually a good idea. We can all go on the elevator. There we go.
The digging began. Oscar Zero, where you are now, required the removal of 91,000 cubic yards of soil, or enough soil to cover a football field 4 stories deep. Once the soil was removed, large steel capsules were welded in place. Then a steel rebar mesh was built around the steel capsules. Once the steel mesh was in place, it was filled with concrete. This concrete and steel mesh created walls approximately 4 feet thick. Once the concrete hardened and all of the surrounding support systems were put in place, layer by layer the land was filled and tamped and filled and tamped. Finally, the support building that you are in now was built on top of it all. Air Force enlisted personnel ensured the security of the facilities, prepared meals for the on-site personnel, maintained the countless types of equipment on the sites, ensured the continued operability of the nuclear warheads that sat atop the missiles, and even transported the missiles when need be. Air Force officers were trained as missile combat crew members, or missileers, and in 2-member crews they had the awesome responsibility for the command, control, and if need be, the launch of the 10 nuclear missiles in their flight.
Just shows everything. We have the launch control facility where we're at right now. We're in between the 2 different capsules that are on either side. So this is the launch control equipment building. This housed a lot of things necessary for the whole launch itself. So we are on a free floating surface, if you haven't noticed. We're about 10 feet above the bottom of the capsule. So there's 4 shock absorbers which help keep everything stable. The 4 shock absorbers are the big mint green cylinders that are in here. And so if there would have been seismic activity or some kind of nuclear attack nearby, everything in here would essentially be stable. That's also why everything is bolted to the floor for the same reason, just to keep everything stable in here.
Diesel generator, huh? Wow, look at the size of that engine.
Yeah, and this can actually run if there's no power for up to 6 to 8 hours.
It'll be nice and toasty in there too, I guarantee that. Glass valve hydraulic control unit.
This capsule is built the same way. The 4 shock absorbers are in here. Everything is bolted to the floor in here as well. But there is a small little bathroom in here, if you haven't noticed, airplane sized. Fun fact, that door was not put on until the late 80s when women started working down here. If all these missiles lit up green, that meant clean and green, and that meant all your missiles were good. There wasn't any issues with them. However, if a security light would come on, that would mean one of the motion detectors had been tripped. So the missileers would have to send out a security team to go check that out. These lights in the middle were never used. They were, for launch and process, missile away, fun things like that. But they were never used, obviously. They did actually get the order to get their keys out a few times. Obviously never launched. But there was a specific time in 1983 that they misinterpreted something Russia was doing, and things got pretty heated and close to being launched down here. Why the seat is kind of built the way it is and why there's railings in the middle of the floor. If they did have to ever launch, or if there would have been attacks nearby, they would have to strap themselves in, and then they can move along the railway.
In the mid-1990s, after decades of engineering and constructing nuclear weapons, selected Minuteman sites across the nation were dismantled and destroyed. On July 31st, 1991, U.S. President George H.W. Bush and Soviet President Mikhail Gorbachev signed the Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty, or START, and both nations agreed to drastically reduce their number of strategic offensive nuclear weapons. To meet the requirements set forth in the START Treaty, 3 of the 6 Minuteman missile wings, including the 321st at Grand Forks, were deactivated and destroyed. By June 1998, the final missile in the 321st had been pulled from its silo.